day, grade 12 learners. Welcome to today's economics lesson. My name is Mr. Berry. This lesson is brought to you by the Northern Cape Department of Education in collaboration with Pagama Research and Development. Good day again, grade 12s. For today's lesson, our knowledge area will be macroeconomics and economic pursuit. We are preparing for paper 1, November examination. Our objectives are as following. We are going to be answering an examination paper 1. This is to prepare you to be able to answer your November examination paper 1. We are going to use a prelim examination of 2023 paper 1, the Western Cape. Right, let's look at our assessment plan. Just to remind you, paper 1, it is 150 marks. You are given 2 hours, and then you are having 2 main topics, which is your macroeconomic, economic pursuit. Macroeconomics has 4 units that you need to know: secular flow, business cycle, public sector, foreign exchange, market. Then economic pursuit, you have protectionism and free trade, economic growth and development, regional development, and then your economic and social indicators. Those are your 8 important topics for your paper 1. So when you go write your paper 1, you must have studied and revised on those 8 subtopics. Right, so these are some examination tips for you to score a nice mark in economics. In economics, you need to know your subject content. That is the first thing. For you to know which subject content it is important, you need to follow the examination guideline from the first chapter until the last chapter. How many chapters do we have in economics? All of them, including for paper 2. There are 14 of them. So from chapter 1 to chapter 14, examination guideline must be your friend. When you look at secular flow, you must know what starts in a secular flow. Is the description, is the graphs, the diagram of secular flow, and it ends with multiplier. Business cycle, what does it start with, and then how does it end? So you must know your examination guideline like you know yourself. That will make you score a nice distinction in economics if you know your examination guideline. Because any question that comes your way, if a person is asking you about the macro objectives, you must know, oh, we're talking about public sector, right? So that is just before the reason for public sector failure, and it's after the problem of provisioning. So it means that you understand the examination guideline and it's easy for you to respond to the question, right? And you need to make notes, create mind maps. Look at your textbooks. If you have different textbooks, find an easy way to understand the content, right? Look at the study guides. Sometimes study guides, they summarize the information nicely for you to understand. After you have covered all these 8 topics for paper 1, what do? You work through the previous question papers. Working through the previous question paper assists you in understanding how questions are asked. Before you get to the examination room, you know how economics questions are asked. You don't get confused when you see a question paper. You know that you're expecting higher order question. And you look at the marking guideline as well. At the stage now, when you are answering the question paper, the previous question paper, you must have access to the marking guideline as well, so that you can see how these questions are asked and how we mark at the end of the year. Right. So when you are doing this as well, you're using your question paper, you must look at the question, how it's asked. Do not answer half a question. Read the entire question. Answer questions that you feel like are not asked correctly. For example, if you know that savings is a leakage, and if it's a leakage, it means it decreases money in the circular flow. And then they ask you the benefit of savings. You do not go astray and you start answering the negative impact of savings. You are asked the benefit of savings. A person that asks that question knows that there are possible answers to that. So look at in a positive way. Look at savings as a future injection, because savings will come back as an investment. When people are saving, they are not spending much, so the effect of inflation won't be there. So there are possible answers to those questions. That's why we call them higher order questions. They are not directly from the question, your textbook as you've learned. However, they challenge your thinking. So you must read the question and understand. If you are asked the question on economy, answer on economy. If you are asked the question on market, it means it only wants you to respond on businesses and consumers. If you are asked that question, the effect on tourism, that is an example. Look at tourism, don't look at the entire economy. So always answer what you are asked. If they're asking on environment, talk about environment, not infrastructure. Right? Whatever that you are answering must always end on environment, because the question is the impact of large population on environment. You can't say a government has to spend more. That is on economy. So you always need to read the question and understand. Within the question, you select key pointers. What am I asked? You structure your responses, even if you do a small mind map. Say, okay, I'm asked about import. You put M for import. What does import do? Right. Import decreases the leakage, number one. When it's a leakage, it means it decreases the national income. You look at the national income. Right. National income, it means production will be affected. Oh, production, it means employment will be affected. Oh, standard of living. You understand? So you look at all the pointers that you can have to structure your responses. After that, you use the same points, you write full sentences. Then you are going to master answering also higher order questions. Right, grade 12, so we're going to look at your questions that sometimes you find difficult answering in your question paper. We are using the same question paper that we used in a previous lesson, where we looked at more of lower order or middle order questions that it's easy for you to score marks. Right, let's look at this 1.3. You're going to respond to 1.3. You'll be given 5 minutes to answer 1.3.1 up to 1.3.6. The first 3 questions, it's macroeconomics. The last 3 questions, it is your economic pursuit. You may start answering now. Right, grade 12, our time is up. Let's look at the answers. Household spending, which is independent of income, does not depend on income. You can spend because you've withdrawn your money from savings. You can spend because you took a loan, that we call autonomous consumption. The spending that depend on income, what we call it? The one that does depend on income. You must have an income to spend. What is that? Right, if you said induced consumption, you are correct. That is an induced consumption. The lowest point between the end of economic recession and the start of economic expansion, the lowest point, it is trough. Then what is your highest point? Highest turning point. That is peak. If you said peak, you are correct. 1.3.3, transfer of functions and ownership of entities from the private sector to the public sector. So you are transferring them from private to public. That is nationalization. Your answer will be nationalization. So the transfer from public now to private, what do we call that one? When you are moving public to private, what do we call that one? Give you some time to think about it. Right, those who said privatization, you are indeed Correct. When you are moving from public to private, we call it privatization. 1.3.4, the pattern of development that permits future generation as well as the current generation to enjoy the same benefit that you find where as well we find it in the economic issues. We're talking about environmental sustainability, and your answer there is the sustainable development, where the future generation can still benefit, and then also the current generation is benefiting from the same resources. That is a sustainable development. 1.3.5, a nationwide government intervention to create employment using the labor-intensive methods and to give people skills they can use to find jobs. When you see those people wearing orange overalls in your community, doing pavements, assisting in building of high roads, we call that program Expanded Public Works Program. All right. It's a labor-intensive method to give skills and also make those people employable in the future. Percentage of working population who rely on those who are working. So the percentage of working population who rely on those who are working, that is, maybe this one was a bit difficult for you, that is dependency rate. They are depending on those who are working. Right. That is dependency rate. Let's move to section B. Right, let's look at question 2, macroeconomics. Question 2, remember, it's only macroeconomics, so you can have a game plan before you go to examination. Planning to answer macroeconomics. Question 2, it means you're also going to answer question 4, and it means that you're mastering circular flow, business cycle, public sector, and the foreign exchange market. Those 4 units become your friend. Right, 2.1.2, what effect will there be on multiplier if there's an increase in the welfare grants? The question, effect on what? Multiplier. When there's an increase in welfare grants. So when the social grants are increasing, what happens to the multiplier? Effect, is it negative, positive, increasing, decreasing? That is what you're answering. What will happen to the multiplier? There's an increase in money. People are receiving more money. What happens to the multiplier? Now you need to think. Injections. J for injection, it does what to multiply. L for leakages, it does what to multiply. What injections do we have? Injections that we have is export, government expenditure, investment. Right? Let's put X for export. X for export. Because E, we use it for expenditure in economics. So GICs, those are what? Are injection. Leakages is SMT. Savings, import, taxes. Right? So when there's an increase in welfare grant, it means there will be more spending. Right? What will happen to the multiplier? Injection increases the multiplier. Leakages decreases the multiplier. When there's an increase in welfare grants, it means there will be more spending. What will happen to the multiplier? I'll give you 2 minutes to discuss this one. Then we look at the possible answer on the marking guideline. Right, grade 4, you are done discussing. Right, let's look at the answer. Government is increasing their spending, and this is seen as an inflow of money, and it increases. Its increase will result in proportionally bigger increase in the economy, meaning the multiplier will increase. Right? When you're looking at this, the response on the marking guideline, it can even go further to say an income in the economy will increase. Increasing what? Increasing the multiplier. The multiplier. If your answer was the multiplier will increase because the government spending increases, you are excellent. The multiplier, what's the effect on the multiplier? The multiplier will increase as government spending is increasing. Remember, government spending is part of injections. So injection is your government spending, investment, and export. If any of these things are increasing, the multiplier is going to increase. But if anything or any of these leakages are increasing, the multiplier is going to decrease. Any leakage increase, the multiplier decrease. Right, let's look at 2.2. So 2.2, we're going to look at the 2.2.4 and 2.2.5. Let's look at 2.2.4. It says, explain the relationship between leading indicator and coincident indicator. So on features underpinning forecasting, you find that there is a leading indicator, lagging, you have coincident. So what is the relationship between leading and the coincident? Right. For 2 marks. 2.2.5, why is it important for economists to make forecast? Forecast, we learned that is the prediction of the future using the data that we have. So why is it important for economists to make this forecast? Right, grade 12, you'll be given 6 minutes for this. So you have 2.2.4 and 2.2.5. For this one, you need 2 full sentences. This one, you need 1 full sentence. Your time will begin now to write your answers. Then we look at the marking guideline. Right, grade 12, we are done. Right, let's look at the first one. Explain the relationship between leading indicators and coincident indicator. So leading, they are moving before. They tend to reach turning points before we are there. And then coincident, it happens immediately as the economy is changing. It also changes, right? The leading indicators changes before the economy changes, and it shows where it is headed, whilst the coinciding indicator confirms the leading indicator's behavior and moves at the same time as the economy. So the leading will show us where we're heading. So the leading using CPI, for example, inflation, it will tell us in the next 3 months, the inflation is going to be high due to this and this, right? And then when the inflation is changing now, the current inflation rate is a coincident now, is giving us what? It confirms what was predicted. So leading indicator is a prediction, then the coincident, it confirms that whatever that was predicted, if it is like that. 2.2.5, why is it important for economists to make forecasts? Where are we predicting? Forecasts indicate when the next change in the business cycle will occur. So when we predict, we know what will happen, right? Forecasts are used to get an idea where the economy is headed. We can see where the economy is going. Investors use forecasts to adjust their strategy to take advantage of the future market events that will affect their income. So investors can use this information to come up with strategies on their investment. Businesses use forecasts to determine economic events. Policymakers use forecasts to make possible changes in the monetary policy. So for the monetary authorities, the Reserve Bank, to change interest rate, they need to use the forecast that is given, the prediction of the CPI, that the prices may increase, to do what? To make changes by increasing repo rate prior to that. So when they know that it's forecasted that the CPI is going to be high, they can increase the repo rate now so that they avoid having problems in the future, right? So these are the possible responses. If you feel like your answer, it is not exactly as this one, but then it's correct and relevant, then you may raise your hand and the teacher will look at your answer. Then it's either it is correct or you can get a half mark for half truth if it's not entirely correct. Right, we have 2.3. You study the information below and answer the question that follows. You have 2.3.4, 2.3.5. Explain the impact of public sector failure on economic growth. If the public sector is failing, what will happen to the economic growth? For 2 marks, you discuss that in a sentence. If the public sector is failing, economic growth, this and this and that. 2.3.5, how does corruption affect service delivery? So, government is failing to deliver service correctly. How does corruption an effect to failing of delivering services correctly? Right, you have 6 minutes, write something down, then we look at the marking guideline. Right, thank you, grade 12. Our time is up. Let's look at your responses from the marking guideline, and you look at yours and you mark yourself as well. Explain the impact of public sector failure on the economic growth. Public sector failure, it means that government is not allocating the resources correctly. Right. Inefficiency allocation of resources by the public sector can lead to misallocation of capital and labor, reducing the overall productivity and economic growth potential. So when a government is failing, then it means resources are going to be misallocated when it comes to capital, labor, and that will reduce the productivity and the economic growth will also decline. Or we can say when the public sector becomes too large, it can crowd out private investment and entrepreneurship, diminishing the innovation and investment needed for economic expansion. So if most businesses are owned by the government, that can do what? Can reduce the private investment, and that will reduce what? The public, the economic growth. Right? Resources are not provided correctly. Infrastructure is not there for businesses to expand. That will result in what? Economic growth deteriorating. So if we've mentioned that public sector will result in infrastructure, lack of infrastructure, then businesses cannot invest, and then that will decrease our economic growth. You are still correct. Any other relevant response. Now 2.3.5, how does corruption affect service delivery? So will be having different responses on this one. How does corruption affect the service delivery? So you look at your community. What service are we talking about here? We're talking about the services that we get from our municipality, local government, right? Water, proper roads, schools are there, bridges. So how does corruption affect this service delivery? Removal of garbages. So corruption will result in the state funds not being used correctly, meaning state funds are not allocated for projects that need to be done in the community. So service won't be delivered correctly, where you find that the money is not used for what it was intended for. Corruption can come as nepotism, where they are hiring management that is not well equipped or skilled to do what? To manage whatever service that is going to be delivered. So corruption will affect service delivery negatively. Services won't be delivered correctly or allocated correctly to the community because of corruption. Money provided by the government or the taxpayer money, it won't be used efficiently. Therefore, you find that there is protest in the community because they are fighting for what? They are fighting for proper service delivery. So corruption will affect the service delivery in the community. Right. Let's look at 2.5. 2.5 says, evaluate the effectiveness of monetary and fiscal policy to smooth out business fluctuation. Evaluate the effectiveness How effective is the monetary and fiscal policy to smoothen out the business cycle? So this question is very nice because you have plenty of answers for this one, right? So you are given two policies and you are talking about the effectiveness. It is effective or not. So you can say it is effective or you can say it's not effective. And also smoothing out the business cycle. They didn't mention if you are at trough or at peak. So are you expanding it or restricting it? Doesn't matter. So this, it gives you more responses for this question. So you have so many answers for this question. You can even write an essay about this one, right? So for 8 marks, you need 4 full sentences to evaluate. When you evaluate, you say if it's effective or not, or you can just say it's effective, or you can just say it's not effective, using the monetary and fiscal policies to smooth out the business cycle. Right? You'll be given 6 minutes to respond. Then we look at the marking guideline. Right, grade 12, our time is up. Let's look at the marking guideline. So monetary policy, we said how effective is monetary policy or fiscal policy to smooth out business cycle fluctuation. Remember here, you're not saying they can increase interest rate. They can. You say how effective. So you should say that they increase interest rate to smoothen what business cycle when we are at inflation so that people borrow less. So you give answers as if like it's a fact, not they can or they should. The South African Reserve Bank has the power to determine monetary policy by adjusting interest rate and controlling the money supply. The South African Reserve Bank can try to control inflation and stabilize the economy using what? Interest rate and money supply. Lower interest rate can encourage lending and investment, but can also fuel inflation. So here you're saying that by lowering the interest rate, that can encourage what? Lending and investment. Meaning, if we are at trough, if they are lowering interest rate, then it can increase what? Investment, meaning there will be more production, then we can start recovering. However, that can do what? Influence fuel inflation as well. It can influence inflation as well, right? A higher interest rate can reduce inflation, but they can also reduce economic activity. So high interest rate will, when we are here, so we are evaluating if we are here and they increase the interest rate, this can decrease inflation. However, it will do what? It will reduce the economic activity as people cannot borrow money anymore. Then the economic activity will decrease. On the fiscal policy, the government has the power to determine the fiscal policy through budget decision and tax measures. In times of economic slowdown, an increase in government spending can stimulate demand for goods and services. On the other hand, excessive government spending can lead to budget deficit. Tax measures can also have an influence on consumption and investment. So when we're speaking of fiscal policy, we are using government expenditure and taxation. So government expenditure and taxation can be used. So they are used. So government, when we are at trough, would use government expenditure, increase government expenditure when it comes to infrastructural development that will increase production and then more people would be employed. So that is the effectiveness. When we are at peak, government increases taxation so that is less disposable income, people are spending less, that will reduce the inflation rate. That is the effectiveness, right? Not effective, you can say that when government increase taxation, less disposable income, that will reduce the economic activity. Right. Let's move to question 3. Question 3, it's only your economic pursuit. Question 3.1.2, why is land redistribution used for development in South Africa? So you need to understand what is land redistribution. So you have land restitution, And then you have land redistribution, restitution, taking it back to those who were previously disadvantaged, and we have land redistribution. Why is it used to use for development in South Africa? So for us to have more development, why are we using land redistribution as one of redress measure? Right, you'll be given 2 minutes to discuss this one. Then we look at your teaching guideline. Right, grade 12, our 2 minutes is done for discussion. Right, why is land redistribution used for development in South Africa? The focus of land redistribution is to give land for housing and production to the previously disadvantaged so that the standard of living can increase. So it is used as a development. Remember, development, it means that the standard of living is improving. So land redistribution, they are giving land to those who were previously disadvantaged. If they have land, then the standard of living can also improve. We accept any other relevant response. 3.2, you study the information there and you answer the following question. 3.2.4, explain the role of the state in the implementation of NDP. Remember, the National Development Plan is one of the policies that we have, is the 2030 policy. They're talking about extending it, but for now, in our books, we know that the NDP is your 2030 plan. So you are explaining the role of government in implementing this NDP. What's the role of a government? Number 3.2.5, how is South Africa positively affected by the NDP? So you need to know the goals of the National Development Plan. What is the goal of NDP? And then you can see how is South Africa positively affected by this. Right? You have 6 minutes. For question 3.2.4, you write one full sentence, and then for 3.2.5, there is 2 full sentences for you to get the 4 marks. The time will begin now. Right, grade 12. We are done. Let's look at the answers. Explain the role of the state in the implementation of National Development Plan, your NDP. The government's role in the implementation is to set up a framework for the private sector to function within. So they set a framework so that the private sector can function within that framework. 3.2.5, how South Africa positively affected by the NDP. So the NDP will provide infrastructure development. Infrastructure expansion will occur with investment in 5 key physical and social infrastructure. So they will look at these infrastructures: energy, transportation, communication, water, and housing. Right. So there is 5 key infrastructure that will be developed. So that will affect South Africa positively if we are expanding on our infrastructure when it comes to energy, transportation, communication, water, and housing. Other answer there is the agricultural value chain will benefit by addressing the high cost of fertilizers, the inputs, and the promotion of processing and export marketing. Right. So the agricultural value chain will benefit by addressing the high cost of fertilizers. So that will reduce the cost of fertilizers. That will increase what? The agricultural production. Green economy will be, we are continuing with the benefit on NDP in South Africa. Green economy will be promoted by expanding construction and promotion of technologies for solar energy, wind energy, and biofuels. Manufacturing sector will be strengthened through innovation, strong skills development, reduced inputs cost, increased research and development investment. Tourism and certain high-level services are created and expanded, which will lead to an increase in economic growth and development. Remember, we accept any other correct, relevant answer for this one. So if you answer, it matches the question where they're asking you the benefit of NDP in South Africa, then it may be correct. Right, let's move to 3.3. 3.3, we're going to look at the information below, and then you answer the two questions. 3.3.4, you explain why the above states are important. The states on the side, not above the state, why are important for the government? Why is it important for government to have all this information, right? The data. Why the government must collect data. Calculate the percentage of income that is saved by the non-poor household. So the non-poor is this one. How much are they saving? You're going to look at their income, they have expenses there, then you must calculate the saving percentage. Calculate the percentages. You are calculating the percentage of the income that is being saved by the non-poor household, and you show all the calculation. Right, grade 12, you have 6 minutes. Complete the task. Right, let's look at our marking guideline. Explain why the above statistics are important for the government. The government use this stats to help with the budget for the future and helps with the planning of service delivery that must take place. So when we spoke about indicators in general, we said, who are the users? What are the users of indicators? Right, if you've mentioned government, household, investors, economics, you are correct, right? And you have few other users that you have, right? So government also is one of the users of the indicators. So government want to know how to plan. So knowing the size of the population, government will know how to budget, right? Also knowing how the size of population will also give an idea to the government, the tax space, how much they are going to collect as tax. So government use the stats to do what? To set up the budget and also to plan for service delivery. If they know how many we are, then they can set what service. They can plan to give us service delivery, right? So by understanding how many people are poor, then they know how to budget for those. 3.3.5, calculate the percentage of income saved by the non-poor. Show all calculation. So for you to get savings, because you are not given savings, you are given income and expenses. So for you to get savings, you must take income minus expenses, and then this is your savings. So this is how much the non-poor households save. So you need to get what? The percentage of this amount from their income. So you take the savings divided by income. Savings divided by income times 100. Remember, we are looking for a percentage. Times 100 divided by 1. Then your percentage will be 24.17%, or you can round it off to 24.2. So what you do, you take income minus expenses, you get your savings. After getting your savings, you divide your savings with income, because you want what? A percentage of income saved. Right? How much percentage is being saved? Right, let's move to 3.5. 3.5 says evaluate the appropriateness of BEE in South Africa. So you're going to evaluate the success of the BEE in South Africa. So when you evaluate the appropriateness of BEE, your Black Economic Empowerment in South Africa, you can see the success or not successful of it. So you need to understand what was the aim of the BEE. Then you can evaluate it, right? You have 6 minutes to write 4 full sentences to respond to this. For you to respond to it easier, you need to understand what was the aim of the Black economic empowerment. Was there for what? Then you can evaluate if it's successful or not. Right, grade 12s, let's look at your marking guideline. So the question was to evaluate the appropriateness of Black economic empowerment in South Africa. The BEE was there to create an inclusive economy for Black people as well, to take part, those who were previously disadvantaged. Is it working or not? But then we've seen that the BEE was replaced by the triple BEE. It means it was evaluated and then it had shortcomings. That's why they introduced the triple BEE. Right. So let's look at the responses here. It empower more Black people to own enterprises, which is a success. It promote access to finance for Black economic empowerment. Assist in development of the operational and financial capacity of the triple BE enterprises, especially small, medium, micro enterprises and Black-owned enterprises. Increase the extent of Black female ownership of enterprises. So those are what the success of what? Of BEE. So that is you evaluating the success of BEE in South Africa. So those are the positive impact. Let's look at the negative impact. If you were to evaluate the negative impact, policies has been hijacked and repurposed by individuals for the purpose of corruption and self-enrichment. So the same people were using fronting where they will act like the business is owned by Black people and then they can get funds from that. Some people were just giving tenders to people who were not deserving. During COVID, national funding was put aside for the procurement of personal protective equipment. So some money were put aside for your PPE. The policy only benefited a tiny group of people, right? I mean, widespread poverty, economic stagnation, and unemployment. So it only benefited a few people, and that resulted in poverty still being there and economic stagnation and unemployment being high. There are an elite few who have benefited the most from the BEE, escaping accountability. So there's only few people who have benefited from this BEE. So those are the negative impact of when you evaluate, you can say it is not successful because of all these 4 points that we have mentioned. And remember, you don't have to say positive only or negative only. You can mix, you can have 2 positive, 2 negative, right? It doesn't have to be only positive or only negative. It is how you structure your answers, but they must be clear that you're speaking of the negative or you're speaking of the positive. Right, grade 12, thank you so much for joining in today's class. We've come to the end of the lesson. So what we're looking at today were the question that we sometimes avoid answering, your 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, your questions that needs you to think, 2.2.5, 2.3.5. You need to structure your answers like mentioned at the beginning of the session, that you must structure these questions first, look at what you are asked so that you are able to answer the entire question. And it becomes easy if you highlight key pointers for yourself. You highlight key pointers, you structure the answers, then you start responding in full sentences. Thank you so much, grade 12, for joining in. I'll see you next time. Keep well.